So right now I am just getting the streaming set up. Just one moment.
I'm going to ask that Kelly works in every jurisdiction I work in. That would be great.
All right, so everybody. Okay, we are streaming and let's get the recording beginning. I'm going to record to the clip. And our webinar is starting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, well, I think with that, I can go ahead and get us started. I'll get my gavel out, make it official. And good morning. I'm going to go ahead and call this session of the City of Lacey Hearings Examiner to order. For the record, today is August 30th, 2022 at 10 a.m. We have one item on the agenda this morning. This is number 21-383. The lift station number 3 replacement conditional use permit application involving a request for approval of a conditional use permit or CUP to allow the replacement of a sanitary sewer lift station and construction of a new wastewater lift station and related infrastructure, including wet well, electricity building, valve vault, and access road on a 9,583 square foot site at 4406 26th Avenue Southeast. My name is Andrew Reeves. I'm a hearings examiner with Sound Law Center, who the city has selected to hold certain land use application hearings like this one. And today it will be my role to collect evidence in the form of exhibits and testimony to determine whether this proposal is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and other long-range planning documents, zoning ordinances, critical areas ordinances, and the specific criteria for approval of a conditional use permit under the municipal code. And because this does involve a facility that is considered an essential public facility, ensure that it complies with the requirements for a type 3 facility under section 1666-060C of the municipal code. To that end, I received 20 exhibits in advance of the hearing that I had an opportunity to review. These include a staff report prepared by city staff, the application materials themselves, including the permit materials that were prepared by the applicant. I do note that the applicant in this situation is another sort of team on city staff. And so there has been sort of one group working on it and another group reviewing it, but this is not uncommon. And part of the review process here is to ensure that there is an independent third-party review, which is my role today. But in addition to the application materials, also the environmental checklist and other environmental materials that were prepared for this proposal, including the determination of non-significance that was ultimately issued by the city, information on the site itself, including technical reports, including information on drainage, trees on site, landscape plans themselves, technical comments from those reviewing the document, a few comments from reviewing departments and agencies, including the Department of Ecology and the Olympic Region Clean Air Authority, or ORCA, and information on the notice that went out in relation to the application as well as today's hearing. So I'm going to go ahead and admit those 20 exhibits into the record. Should anyone have additional exhibits they would like admitted into the record, let me know when it's your opportunity to testify, and I will go ahead and address admitting additional exhibits at that time. Speaking of testimony, our testimony this morning will be under oath or affirmation. That's because we're my decision to be appealed. Sorry, we're in Lacey. It's the recommendation, and ultimately, if there were an appeal, part of the foundation for that appeal would be the recording, as well as my recommendation and the admitted exhibits. Finally, the order that we typically follow is first we'll hear from planning staff in this case, who will give an overview of the proposal and the review process that led us to today. Following that, I believe we'll be hearing from Puna Clark on behalf of Public Works, who will provide additional detail about the proposal. And then we will see if there are members of the public interested in testifying, and if so, they will have that opportunity. We did not receive any comments from members of the public that I'm aware of in advance of the hearing, and it does not appear that we have any members of the public in attendance. But when we get to that point in the hearing, we'll check just to make sure. And then following that, if necessary and appropriate, we'll go back to the applicants and city staff to respond to any such testimony. So that's the order we're going to follow. I thank everyone for being here. And with that, we'll go ahead and get Reese Fant sworn in, who I believe is presenting on behalf of planning staff. Thank you for being here, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Great. And did my explanation of the exhibits track with what you were hoping I would look at today, Mr. Fant?
Yes, your explanation was accurate.
Thank you. And if you could just state and clearly spell your name for the audio recording.
Yeah, my name is Reese Fant, Assistant Planner at the City of Lacey, and it is spelled R-E-A-C-E, Fant, F as in Frank, A-N-T.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so as mentioned before, this will be the replacement of a lift station number 3. It was originally on a single family residential site. The building had been demolished prior to application, going through ORCA and all the routes there, getting the appropriate permitting for that. It's going to be an upsize, essentially. The intent, and Puna can touch on this later, is there would be new access for staff safety and things of that nature. It's an older site, so it needs the modernization. The primary elements for this, and while we're here, is the conditional use permit. That means due to the zone it being low density, this is a public facility. So it goes through the conditional use process as a essential public facility by which it's allowed. The main element of this site we're touching upon would be the landscaping. That'll be the only thing that'll be being adjusted compared to your normal site. And that's due to the limitations of the equipment that's being placed on site, with the amount of undergrounding materials that are with it. And then for the reason that this application came to be was for staff safety, with the access route has added some limitations as where the structures can go. So on the north and the east end, there will we are proposing a small reduction in the landscape buffer, which will be supplemented with probably with decorative fencing and things of that nature, which is a limited staff review after the fact.
So sorry, just to clarify that point, Mr. Fant. So
Yep.
Traditionally, my understanding is a 15-foot landscape type 1 buffer would be required, and the request is some reductions or alterations to the buffer on the north and east side to allow appropriate access. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, great. Sorry, go right ahead.
That about wraps up my summary of the project.
Sure. And so you had mentioned ORCA earlier. So essentially, I think their comment had more to do with the replacement. And my understanding is that we don't have a full removal of the previous station. I think some structures are being removed, but then it's being decommissioned, and ORCA, their comment had to do with, assuring there's no air quality impacts. I suspect there weren't any asbestos issues, but that was the basic concept. Is that right?
Yeah. Previously, there was a single family home there that was demolished, and ORCA. We go through ORCA regardless for any demolishing, so it's more of a just a standard boilerplate comment. And then they also had a comment for the generator sizing. And that's something I think Puna can touch on a bit better when it comes to the knowledge of generators and how that'll work with ORCA.
Sure. And speaking of sort of pro forma or standard comments, I think the only other agency comment was from Department of Ecology, and it was that sort of pro forma comment about solid waste, toxic cleanup, water quality, the potential need for permits, et cetera. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. And it was, and I believe there was no comment for the Tacoma smelter plume. And since it was just boilerplate, that's why it was going through the determination of non-significance as opposed to an MD&S.
Excellent. Okay. And then just to be clear, ultimately, I think I misspoke at the outset and I apologize. It's sometimes difficult to change modes, but ultimately I'm making a recommendation to the council on this CUP. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And I think I saw you nodding in agreement in my opening remarks, but to the best of your knowledge, we have not received any public comments prior to the hearing from members of the public and in advance of our hearing today. Is that right?
There's been no written comment, no.
Okay, great. Well, I know it's a huge disappointment, but I don't have any further questions for you, Mr. Fant. So I think at this point, why don't we just go to Puna Clark, who can give us a little more technical detail on the proposal.
Perfect.
So, Puna Clark, thank you so much for being here. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And if you could state and spell your name for the audio and explain your role here at the city.
Puna Clark, PUNACLARKE, Project Manager, Utility Engineer, City of Lacey Public Works.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. And I guess right at the outset, in my understanding of sort of the process, was I accurate to the extent that we're decommissioning the former station and constructing a new one? Is that an accurate assessment of what's happening here?
Yes, the existing lift station 3 is in the right of way, and we are moving the new lift station to the adjacent property on site.
But when you say moving the lift station,
We're building a new lift station.
okay, I was going to say it's all basically new construction,
New construction,
all
not
the shiny
using,
newest, all the shiny newest good tech is involved. Is that an accurate assessment?
yes. The existing lift station is the oldest lift station in the city of Lacey.
Okay. Great. Well, are there any other details you wanted to share? And maybe you can touch on the landscaping and the request to reduce the 15-foot typical buffer.
Yes,
Yeah.
so we will be constructing a new lift station on the new property. It will include electrical controls building. Due to the new construction, we will be modifying the required landscaping in the, it's actually on the the west and south side of the property. So it's actually on the corner of the property. If you look at the site plan, it's near the wet well and the site lighting and the valve vault. And the reason for it is for site access for an operation and maintenance. There is an existing, we will be putting in new fencing, and there is no area for the new landscaping and the new items to fit all together.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying. I think I probably misspoke. And so there is a buffer proposed on the north and east. There
Yes.
are some portions that are not 15 feet, which I think was what Mr. Fant was saying. But then also there's no buffer, no landscape buffer at all on the west and south. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. And
Yes.
thank you. If you can elaborate as you were doing, I apologize.
Yes, on the north and east side is where we have residential neighbors, and we will have that buffer on those sides,
Okay, so
the landscaping buffers.
Sure. So for the north and the east, there is a landscape buffer, and now
Yes.
I'm actually looking at the plan in front of me. And there's a few portions where it's not fully 15 feet, but there is a buffer there to the residences. And
Yes.
then where there won't be a buffer, that's where we are abutting Golf Club Road Southeast and 26th Avenue Southeast.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, excellent.
Yes. And and the reason being is for operation and maintenance and for the access vehicles to enter and exit the site as well.
Okay.
We have, our largest vehicle is 40 feet in length, and it is difficult to see around the corner
Got it.
as well.
If there were buffering in particular, if you had
Yes.
vegetation. Got it. Okay. Okay, and then in terms of review, I assume you had an opportunity to review Mr. Fant's staff report and the conditions that were recommended by planning staff.
Yes, I have no objections for the Orca or the City of Lacey comments provided, as well as the ecology comments provided.
Okay. So no concern about complying with the recommended conditions from staff and
No.
others. Okay.
And we have submitted our environmental checklist and have received our DNS.
Right. Okay.
And Mr. Reeves, for the record, there's two different sections of code that touch upon that landscaping for 16 the 0 or 80 and then the 1666 for conditional uses.
Sorry, 1680 is the more generalized landscaping portion of the code, right? And
Yes, and that allows for the options and combinations, and then 66 allows for the variations in sizing requirements.
yes, thank you for clarifying is the word I'm looking for. Great. Okay, Ms. Clark, anything further you wanted to share, or any other members of your team you were hoping to hear from today?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Oh,
And,
actually, I do have one item. So we did also submit our removal of covenants from the property that we submitted our documentation.
oh, good. Thank you for reminding me of that. So that was the document. I figured out ultimately what it was, but that was the one that had,
The signatures.
yes, many signatures. And so can you just clarify for the record what that was and why it was necessary, just so we can.
So this property is in, has covenants on it that states that it can't have certain items on its property. And so you needed to get signatures from the property owners in that HOA. And so previously, we, as a property owner, we got signatures from more than 50% of the HOA property owners, and they agreed to remove those covenants, allowing the city to put a wastewater lift station on this property.
Got it. Okay, so under our state subdivision act, essentially, when you're going to alter an approved plat, you need 50% of signatures from property owners within the neighborhood, and then another level of review, which is sort of beyond the scope of in essence, what I would have any authority over. But when there is covenants in place, that's a private agreement between parties. But what you're showing me is that even on that level of review, the private agreement between Lacey as the property owner and the other property owners within that neighborhood, they have essentially agreed that, you know, this project should be allowed. Is that an accurate assessment of things in your mind?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Then I think I have a good understanding of all that. So with that, I think, Mr. Fant, anything further you wanted to add, or any other members of staff you were hoping to hear from?
No, I got no further comment, and I'm not waiting on any other staff.
Okay, well, as I think we know, I don't often or always get to do this in the city of Lacey, or lots of places, but based on my review of this proposal, I don't see any concerns. And so my intent is to ultimately issue a recommendation to the council here in the next couple of weeks, recommending approval of this proposal with the conditions that have been recommended by staff. So that will be in my intent. And with that, I think we can go ahead and end our hearing today.
Mr. Gemner,
Yeah, Mr. Beck, sorry.
just for the record, I'd like to note that there's nobody present at the council chamber, so there is no member of the public here, as well as virtually.
And I apologize, Grant Beck, I did not realize this was also technically a hybrid meeting. Is that
Yep.
right?
That's correct. Yeah,
Can I just swear you in so that we can put that on the record? Grant Beck, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
And could you explain who you are?
Grant Beck, I'm the Planning and Development Services Manager for the City of Lacey.
Okay, and if you could just repeat what you were pointing out there.
Yeah, just to clarify that I'm in the council chambers for the in-person portion of this hearing, and there is no member of the public present to provide testimony.
Okay, so you're there by yourself in the big room, and no one is there. So, and no one has joined us online either. So I think with that, we can confidently say that we have heard from those that we're hoping to be heard from in relation to this particular matter. And as I previously stated, my intent is to issue a decision recommending that the council approve this request for the lift station number 3 replacement project. So now